we can start whenever you're ready, since we have all the pencil here.
Okay, looks like we're ready to go. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's 7:32. And is Keith here?
Hello, Susan.
Hey,
How are
Keith.
you and everybody else on the council? Is everybody there?
All the council members are here.
Hello, Niles, Todd, and Arthur, and Katja. Hello to everyone from Keith, the weatherman. We had a pretty cold night last night. It was 22 degrees in Gaithersburg. Still didn't get officially below freezing. It was only 32 at Reagan National Airport. It was 27 here at my house on Turner Lane. And I'm glad to say that that kind of cold is going to be very short-lived. I'm not looking for any cold weather like that again in the foreseeable future going into December.
Good.
So that's very, very good news. And that's the way the weather pattern is shaping up. Thanksgiving right now looks pretty good. Rain on Wednesday. There's a chance we could get rain lingering into Thursday morning next week. Of course, that's a week away, but right now it looks pretty good with temperatures up near 60 degrees. And that's always good at this time of the year. And last but not least, how about a little weather trivia? Did you know, and I really didn't know this until I looked it up, that it has never snowed in Washington, D.C. on November the 2nd. That's the only day in the month of November that we have not had at least a trace of snowfall.
Wow.
Let's hope it stays that way for the whole winter. And I'd like to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Keith. You too. Thanks for that report. So we'll be entering resident comments, just period now. And I'd like to remind everyone that we will be adhering to our two-minute rule. And would appreciate if you all do not use the chat because it's very distracting to residents and to the council members. Who would like to make a comment?
Susan, can we ask everybody to mute when they're not speaking?
Yes.
There seems to be a lot of echo right there.
Lots of echoes. Yes, please mute if you're not on.
So could we also ask people to identify themselves if they aren't listed by name?
Yes.
So we have a list of attendees, please?
Traditionally, we ask speakers to state their names and streets, and that would be great.
This is Marty on Chestnut Street, and I'm just asking, there are some phone numbers and other, I would like everybody to just, know who's here, so who's attending. That's all, because it's not clear from the participants list. Thank you.
Susan, can I speak? This is Larry Wasson.
Sure. Hey, Larry.
Okay. First thing is, and I brought this up last night at the walkability thing, but as some of you know, we for the first time, we moved here in 1979, and for the first time ever, about 4 months ago, our basement was flooded, and it turns out that, and it was about $21,000 in damage. But it turned out that the primary culprit was the fact that in the repaving of Thornapple Street, water now comes up over the curb, and a good chunk of the water is supposed to go to the drain, ends up coming down our driveway and into our basement. And I'm very concerned because I wrote letters to all the council members. The same letter, I've copied it to all, asking that something be done about this. Yesterday, I found WSSC was out here repaving. However, they weren't paving this area at all, and I still have a problem about this. And I would like to know when the council can take action on this. I have no way to stop that water when it comes down that hill. I cannot stop it. and I can't put a pump there. I'll pump it right back up into the street. So what am I supposed to do? And it never occurred before.
Okay, we'll look
And
into
the rain
this.
wasn't even that heavy.
Oh, I'm not talking about recently. I'm talking about when it occurred. And I have videos of this. I have film of this water washing up over the curb, literally. I mean, the concrete curb, as well as the driveway apron, and coming down into the driveway. So
Okay, we'll look into it, Larry.
the other thing I'd like to say is that I think there was a request to have a letter entered into the record today about the recent activity with the ordinances, and I totally, absolutely concur, and want you to know that this last ordinance, I find no basis to justify the council or the village money being spent on that issue, and I would also request the council members to consider seriously having the manual written for the volunteers that has been suggested. I
Okay,
think it's an outstanding idea.
okay, thank you. Who else would like to speak?
I would. This is Holly Worthington on Turner Lane.
Right,
Hi, everybody. First, I want to thank everybody who volunteers here because I know you're kind of going through a lot of stuff right now, and I don't want to be part of giving anyone a hard time. But I will just throw in my 10 cents, and that is, I think we can solve this problem without an ordinance, and I hope you all on the council will consider not having an ordinance that has to do with ethics, because I think while ethics are important, I think we can do it with a manual, and I also think it scares away people from volunteering for the council. It certainly would scare me away, and I just think we can put a process in place in a manual without turning it into an ordinance. So thanks for considering my comments. Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, you have to imagine that I'm Lauren Beal. I'm speaking on her behalf. She sent in a PowerPoint actually to the council having to do with trees, and she wants to revive a proposal that the tree committee had proposed about 4 or 5 years ago to have. I'll read it to you. It has to do with the issuance of a village building permit for a project that will entail the removal of one or more trees having a circumference of 24 inches or greater, 4.5 feet above the ground. That's a big tree. Should be conditioned on replacing the trees selected from an approved list. And we had made this proposal, the tree committee had, and the council at that time chose not to do it. She has experienced the removal of a number of very large, old canopy trees from an adjoining lot that was the home to a lot of wildlife, that provided a huge amount of uptake of water in a low-lying area, and it was really quite destructive. So I would like to further second her proposal, and in fact,
That stuff on Thornapple.
Suggest that if somebody takes down a large tree, not only should they put up another one in instead, but pay a fee. And I would establish a fee to go into our own tree budget that we spend about over $30,000 a year on to maintain village trees, to enhance that fund and also act as a deterrent to taking down trees. I would see a fee of, say, $10,000 to take down a large 50-year-old oak or something of that sort as not being unreasonable. All the research I've done suggests that trees add 5 to 10% of value to a property and to the community. At rates around here, that would be something like $50,000 to $100,000 of destroyed value when such a tree is taken down. And so having a penalty to go in to enhance the trees is not unreasonable.
That would have cost that developer like $100,000 or more. $10,000 a tree.
Someone is
Yeah,
not muted. If
that's
you would like to speak, you can have the floor. Okay, anyone else?
I'll just jump in.
Okay.
Hi, Phil Irwin, Turner Lane. I'll be very brief. I've said this elsewhere, but I'd like to say it here. Starting with the sign ordinance brouhaha, a number of residents have, including myself, have been calling on the council to try to find ways to communicate better with the public, to communicate more openly, more honestly, more easily, more comfortably, more informally. And we've had a number of discussions here about the difficulties in making that happen. I just want to take a moment to commend Todd Mann for figuring out a way to make that happen in his letters and his posts on the listserv and his emails to the community. They've been open, they've been clear, they've been plain English, and as I've said elsewhere, we may not all agree on the ordinance, but I think we can agree that we have found a way forward on something we've been talking a lot about, and I think Todd has led the way forward. I think we should thank him for that, and I hope that the other council members will follow his lead, and we'd love to hear more of that kind of communication from Todd and from the rest of you as well. So thanks to him, and let's try to move forward in that spirit.
Thank you. We love positivity. Next.
I would like to piggyback on that and say that I think that we do really, I mean, there's been such a clear community expression of the need for better communication, more straightforward communication, more upfront communication. And I think that there was a group of residents in the community who sent the council a letter back on November 12th that had a number of positive recommendations in it. And one of them, I think it was number 5 on the list, was a list of the specific elements that residents have asked for, specifically about ordinance discussions. And my question to the council is, I know you received the letter from the November 12th letter about those positive community priorities, and the communication ordinance process issue was a big one on that list. So my question to the council is, will you do that? I know that the elections ordinance is due to come up soon. Will you follow that? There's like 6 or 7 steps spelled out in that November 12th letter. And will you follow those steps, not just for the current ordinance on ethics, which there's obviously a lot of controversy about, but with the next ordinance, whatever it is, if it's the election ordinance or whatever, would the council commit to following those open steps? Because I think that would really help a lot. What do y'all say?
This is something that we will discuss in some fashion at some time, but we will probably adhere to our agenda.
I will make a comment right now that I am going to say, in fact, we were going to do it last session, which was cut short because of the length of time, to routinely produce a kind of a description of any new ordinance, the reasons for doing it, arguments for and against, make it a regular thing. I will be proposing that later.
But
Thank you.
yeah, we've committed to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is Jeff here, just a comment. I mean, I looked at that and I also agree, and I think there's the communication, but I do believe that an SOP or some sort of schematic or diagram that when a problem is identified, that we have some decision tree that where you have a problem and how it gets diagnosed to a point where you go towards ordinance or something else. And I think that could be added to the communication as well. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. Bill Leogrand?
Bill Leogrand over on Chestnut Street. I want to really second this idea of an alternative to the ethics ordinance. I think one of the reasons that this has created so much furor and debate and negative reaction among a lot of residents is because it poses the possibility of challenging people's integrity and putting their integrity on trial, in effect, and convicting them of breaking a village law. And we don't need to do that to solve the problem. And moreover, I can sympathize with the council's concern that it needs to have some mechanism for processing complaints and dealing with instances of either employee malfeasance or volunteer malfeasance. But this ordinance only solves half the problem. It's really only applicable in cases of violations of the oath of impartiality or conflict of interest. It doesn't get to other kinds of potential malfeasance. Whereas if you had some sort of personnel policy or personnel manual, you could cover all of the potential problems that would come up, and at the same time avoid this very emotional problem that's come up with the ethics ordinance of challenging people's ethics and reputation. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Naomi Nyerman. I confirm I agree with what has been said about the ordinance, the concerns that have been raised, the possibility that we can have a much less benign, more benign, and more an administrative solution to any ethical issues that we may raise. But I also want to ask, the council this evening had a closed meeting with the council about the lawyer about the ordinance. Can you share that with us tonight?
No, we cannot. We can say that we met with council to discuss the ordinance.
And will we ever have?
If Ron is
ever
on,
have,
right? Niles, Ron is on.
Oh, yeah.
Ron, would you care to navigate the boundaries of confidentiality and privilege?
Sure. So the council met in closed session to obtain legal advice related to the ordinance, and those discussions are held in closed session in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege.
And the client is the council?
The client is the village, which is
The village.
operated by the council.
Okay, and there's.
Can you in any way characterize that conversation in a way that can let us know some of the outlines of what was discussed without in any way going beyond the boundaries of what would be confidential?
I may be able to do so if the council wanted me to try, but you know the purpose of the meeting in closed session is to preserve the confidentiality of that advice, and I would be hesitant to try and explain it in a way that might avoid waiving my client's privilege.
Can you explain what confidentiality you're protecting? Exactly what is confidential about it?
The advice a lawyer gives to a client is confidential, and so
I understand. So what defines that in this case?
Why are we not a client?
because
Why are we not privy to that information?
We're clients of the council.
The council could tell us, couldn't they?
yes, the council can waive the privilege.
And I was about to suggest that perhaps we can further explore this when we get to the ethics discussion, which is later on the agenda, in the next session after that, or more likely there will be council member discussions that can address that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. Okay, would anyone else like to comment?
I actually do have another question. I know that various groups of residents have submitted letters about the ethics ordinance and the letter about positive priorities that we could maybe be spending our time on instead. And many of those letters requested two things, that the letters be included in the packet for the council, which of course is up to the council for the packet for the meetings. But some of them also specifically requested they be attached to the minutes as part of the record. And they haven't been. So I'm wondering if the council can explain why the residents' comments, pro or con the ordinance, I mean, they've all pretty much been opposed to the ordinance, but that should be part of the minutes. I mean, the Open Meetings Act does require accurate minutes, and they're really important, not just for the residents, but for the council. So what is the policy on attaching residents' comments? Because we've done what we thought the council did tell us to do, which is, submit comments in writing in advance, and specifically request they be attached to the minutes, and they haven't been. So, what else do we need to do?
I think you have been assured that they will be attached to the minutes of the meeting in which they were introduced if you request that they be attached. We do not have an obligation to attach them. Minutes do not necessarily have to contain elaborate resident comments. Minutes are, as they have been developed at VMA, certainly in the last few months, and to some extent there's been a bit of verbosity creep even prior to that, have become way more stream of consciousness, autobiographical, just a little bit unruly, frankly, to the extent that some residents find them too much to deal with, as you will undoubtedly find on the record and in the survey when we get to that in probably the next meeting. Minutes are really meant to be concise. And yes, we have included resident comments. It's gotten completely beyond the bounds. So to the extent that you want to submit comments, they will be appended. But please try to keep it to a minimum.
Thank you. This is Larry Watson. Susan, thank you for taking the view that they will be recorded. For one thing, with today's cloud capability of storage, certainly we could have 100 letters per meeting and not run out of storage space.
Sure.
And I've been to many a meeting where people standing up have ranted on with all kinds of meandering. Well, yes, but see, that's part of the meeting minutes. So I agree, and I thank you for your position of all the meetings are recorded, and this is another way of having a record of people who send something in, and I thank you very much for what you just said.
Thank you.
Susan, I did have one question as a matter of clarification. It's Jeff. So appreciate the thoughts on the minutes, but I think perhaps some clarification. So in the last meeting, October 15th, I think there were a number of residents who submitted in writing their thoughts, which I think they thought would be included as part of a package that went out as part of the minutes, and they weren't. So just as a matter of process, we're not talking about the minutes. We're talking about statements that may be entered. So is that an SOP where, for example, if a resident is submitting something and says to Niles, our manager, I would like that included for the record, not minutes, but just part of the record, is that the process? Because I think a lot of people submitted things to Niles, but they didn't request that. So just wanted some clarity, because there's a lot of folks who submitted things, and I think, they're wondering why they're not seeing it as attachments. So just to clarify what that process is, and so people feel their voice is heard and
Niles,
recorded.
do you want to field that?
So, yeah, so hang on one second. Okay, so certainly. So if people, so there's two different things. If people want to say they're submitting something for the public record, right? Like when we have a public hearing, it's the public record that gets attached to that topic. If people say they want to attach things to the minutes, I will take that and attach it to the minutes. If so the language previously that were requested. Sometimes if things were submitted and someone said, hey, attach this to the minutes, if it wasn't, that it was an oversight of the office's part, and we can correct that. And I can look back and make sure that there are any things that specifically said adding to the minutes. We can do that. The council, there's one procedural thing to note, is just that the council, because the minutes have already been approved, it would take the council just needing to amend it to say, to basically tell me to include that again. So that's just the one procedural thing, but that's a procedural step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a quick note on that for Niles for our strategic planning and for the group. We do not have a general platform of the village where people can send things in other than the private listserv. And we'd have to look much more clearly at how we communicate and what's available for people to share information and views, and as well as looking for a plumber. The ability to share other views, I think, is valuable. And I want to go on the record as suggesting that the village seriously consider putting up our own listserv for comments of all sorts.
Susan, this is Larry Wasson. If I may, that letter that I sent reporting that the village, the changes in the right-of-way had caused flooding in my house.
Right.
Can that be made part of the record for tonight so that because I'm not getting a response to it and it's been out there for months. So I'm trying to see that there's some formal way that you acknowledge receipt of it.
Okay, well, I'm not aware of this letter. I'm sure I would be happy to acknowledge receipt when I find it. If you want
I'll
to,
send it again.
that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. All right. Anyone else? Okay.
There was one comment that was done in the chat. I just will read that briefly. Alyssa Bean wrote, just also wanted to thank Arthur for picking up the phone when I gave him a call earlier this week. I found the council to be really receptive whenever I send an email or give them a call, follow up with questions or thoughts.
Thank you, Alyssa.
And Susan, this is Jeff here. Sorry, Alyssa, go. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm sorry, I'm keeping my camera off. I got kids in the background and I'm eating my dinner, so. But I'm here and I'm listening.
Great, thank you.
Susan, real quick procedural question. So there was a bunch of things. Arthur brought up Lauren's proposal, which I happen to love. We've lost a lot of beautiful trees around us, and also there were other residents who brought up proposals around volunteer manual and a few other things. So what's the procedure of addressing some of those line items? Do we move on, or because I think they deserve at some point to be taken up? The question is when.
I think they can be put on an agenda. That's how we typically proceed, is to put them on the agenda and have discussions.
Got it. So those points would go on like the next meeting agenda, so the tree proposal and the manual and some of the other things?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, have we reached the end of the comment period? It looks like it. Okay, so if there are no further comments, we'd like to do committee updates. And I would like to start with the walkability task force, since that one will likely be fairly short. And since it's a task force, not a committee.
Yeah.
You're
muted.
Peter, you're on.
I apologize. I may disappoint you on the shortness. I've written out my comments, and it's a bit longer than I'd anticipated.
Okay.
But let me proceed, and you tell me when to stop. So I'm Peter Kahn. I'm here representing the Walkability Task Force that was asked to look at some of the issues relating to pedestrian and traffic safety in the village, and to try to come up with a set of recommendations. And our scope of work mandated that there be a report in February of this coming year, 2021. And there are 5 of us on the committee, 5 residents, I should say. Myself, Larry Wasson, who's here, Catherine Hempel, Laurie Mitchell, and John Sharrow. We've also been working with Chris Jakubiak, a urban planning consultant whom the village has used in a number of on a number of issues. He's been very, very helpful and worked very hard on this. And Arthur has been part of this process as well. We've held numerous meetings over the last 9 months approximately, some of which our consultant, Chris Jakubiak, has presented a raft of data, drawing on maps and traffic studies. We developed a survey of residents and spent some time analyzing that to inquire about resident preferences and help identify real problems and possible solutions. We've made presentations about our work to the village residents, and through this process, I think we've come up with a list of recommendations on which there's fairly clear consensus in the group, and some of these are already in the process of implementation. This list includes sidewalk repair where sidewalk is uneven or broken, cutting back vegetation overhanging either the sidewalks or interfering with traffic sight lines, possible changes to the village code concerning parking, enhanced enforcement of both parking and traffic regulations, improved crosswalks, better delineated, and in some cases where real danger is present, possibly raised crosswalks, better traffic signage, and several access improvements. In other words, to try to reduce the distance that residents have to walk to reach points within the village. And there are two that seem important at this point. One is a possible link between the end of Raymond Street, the dead end of Raymond Street, and Brennan in Rollingwood, that would lead directly to Shepherd Street Park. And secondly, a stair and walkway across the park that would basically join Shepherd Street with Turner at the back end, at the non-Brookville Road side of that. So I believe there's reasonable consensus on these within the village based on the survey results and the comments of residents who've attended the walkability meetings, and I expect that most or all of these will be included in our February report. But at the same time, it seems clear that there are significant pedestrian safety issues within the village that we have not been able to refine to the point of clear and feasible recommendations to the council, and in all likelihood will not be resolvable by mid-February. For those, as Arthur Alexander suggested, I think that a phase 2 walkability project will be necessary, I would suggest. I strongly believe that most of these phase 2 issues deserve attention and commitment from the council and residents, but will clearly need a commitment in advance from the community, considerable engineering expertise that will not necessarily be inexpensive, and in many cases cooperation with neighboring jurisdictions, as well as Montgomery County and the state of Maryland. Let me just give a brief overview of some of these. First of all, Brookville Road. This is the only roadway in the village that is used by most residents on nearly a daily basis. And to quote our consultant, Chris Jakubiak, it is a, quote, pedestrian nightmare. Sidewalks are narrow and offer little or no protection to pedestrians trying to walk next to traffic moving sometimes at fairly high speeds. This is a danger to kids going to and from school, to those of us in the south end whose only means of access to the rest of the village is by walking along Brookville, to people crossing Brookville without adequate crosswalks, and a variety of other issues. There's serious drainage issues on Brookville, and crossing Brookville, Bradley, Thornapple, and other locations is dangerous to pedestrians as well as to cars trying to emerge from cross streets. Fixing Brookville is undoubtedly the single walkability issue that would most enhance pedestrian and traffic environment within the village. However, doing so will require a decision in advance by the council to take on this issue, cooperation with neighboring jurisdictions and especially the state, because Brookville Road is a state highway, and a significant amount of engineering support. One thing that can ameliorate the cost of doing all of this is Montgomery County's Vision Zero project. which attempts to reduce pedestrian injuries and deaths to zero within Montgomery County, and which offers grants to projects that can affect pedestrian safety in a significant way anywhere in the county. Second project that I think should be part of a phase 2 is the issue of pedestrian safety on some of the village streets that lack sidewalks, but that nonetheless carry a significant volume of traffic, often at speeds too high for the design of the streets. There are, I believe, only 4 streets in the village lacking sidewalks completely: Summit, Thornapple, Chestnut, and Dellfield. We recognize that there may be opposition among residents on these streets to improvements. We have no desire to impose, on that opposition. At the same time, our survey revealed meaningful support for improved pedestrian safety on those streets. We propose to do a second survey of residents, focusing especially on those streets to determine attitudes towards various pedestrian safety improvements. Fixing them, should there be significant support, would require engineering assistance, which may be available via the county planning department, assuming there's clear council support for the projects. Third, a redraft of village code provisions relating to traffic, truck usage on residential streets, and parking, combined with some mechanism for meaningful enforcement, whether that's speed cameras and increased police presence or something else. This will in all likelihood have to be done in a second phase of the project. And fourth, improving traffic safety on streets such as Cummings, Shepherd, Thornapple, and Summit that carry volumes and speed of traffic considerably greater than that for which those streets were designed. These streets all carry significant traffic that's merely cutting through VMA and is not local. We shall have to decide how to deal with that outside traffic, and that may take cooperation with other jurisdictions, especially Montgomery County. So we expect, as part of our February report, to propose that there should be a phase 2 to address, we think, some of the most significant pedestrian safety and traffic issues that are in the village, and be happy to give more detail at that time. So at this point, we've used about 2/3 of Chris's budgeted consultant time. We expect that we'll use up a good portion of the remainder before February. And so I think within the context of this project, as it now appears, we probably won't need to go outside of the existing budget. So I think that's sort of a broad outline of what we've been doing and the conclusions that we've sort of stumbled our way towards. And I'll leave it there, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to talk about them.
Okay, well, I guess my first question, I attended your meeting, as you know, last night, and I didn't hear a discussion of all those topics. Is this something you all have determined together? Or
Yes,
is this just
yes, we've been
based on?
talking about them for quite some
Okay,
time. There hasn't been a formal vote on all of them.
okay,
Yeah.
I didn't hear it all last night, so some of them kind of surprised me, but, okay.
Susan,
Yes, Larry.
Larry Watson, and I also, as of last night, we were to have a December 8th meeting with a presentation
Right,
to prepare for providing a phase 1 proposal to the council in December on
Right.
the 17th.
right.
That was my understanding.
That was, yeah, this was, yeah.
I don't have, I've talked to 3 of the members of this committee, and I don't see a consensus on some of these issues.
Yeah, it's very tough to come to a consensus on this. It's also, unfortunately, very tough to, sorry, this sounds really, I really value walkability, but a lot of people just aren't that excited about it. For some reason, they find other issues, I guess, sexier. But no offense, don't mean to denigrate in any way, because I like to walk. But I did notice that the forum was not well attended when you had a forum. And I think generally it's hard to get a turnout when people are kind of zoomed out as it is. But last night's meeting wasn't well attended either. And you guys, I would really like to commend you all for all the time you've put into this study. So you and Larry and John Sharrow and Catherine Hample and Lori Mitchell have all been great.
Lori Mitchell had yesterday pointed out something that may be true about the meeting, the forum. However, that was an unbelievable response we got on the survey that showed a tremendous amount of village interest.
That's true.
Lori, what were there? 192? What was the count?
Yes, Larry, there were 192 responses, and I do concur that we are still in the process of coming up with our with a consensus on some of these issues. But I guess they're all on the table. Maybe was what you meant to say, Peter, right?
Right.
They're all on the table, and I think the list that I gave as part of what we're likely to say in our February report is my sense of that a lot of that is very much a matter of consensus at this point. Some of the things in the later we think of as phase two probably are not, but there may be disagreement about that.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Thank you all for your hard work.
Susan, this is Jeff. I just want to make a couple quick comments. First of all, I do want to commend Peter and the entire task force. You've done such an incredible, astute job. And one thing I picked up on, and again, this is a bit more of a complex question that perhaps we can follow up, but the one area that I have always been focused on, specific to the walkability study, has been the traffic safety, especially for our children and families. And I want to commend you for bringing that up and recognizing that it's a complex issue. And I want to recognize there are people, I'm looking, who's on, and I want to recognize some of my neighbors. I saw Andrew Condors is there, and I remember on the community listserv, he brought this up as an issue as well. And I just want to say, I think we need to figure out, is it something that gets unpacked? Does it stay as part of the walkability study? I know we're going to have the community forum discussion, and others have talked about a safety committee or a group. And so I just want to bring that up as I want to thank you, because I know that this is an issue that continues to worry us, especially with young kids. Absolutely. And really, how are we going to address it? And it deserves more than understanding it could take a year. What are the things we could do now? Because we really don't want something to happen. I think it's something that we need to think about in a shorter term than that. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, Mark, are you ready for your ethics committee recommendations and report? Or report and recommendations?
I guess I am. I'm also a walker, so I commend whatever we can do to help walking. I'm Mark Efron, for those of you who don't know me, although I think when I see the names on here at this point, we've at least met by Zoom. I'm making this report on behalf of the Ethics Committee, which consists of Lori Mitchell, Debbie Rumel, both of whom are on this call, and me. Since our last report to the Council on October 15th, 2020, the Ethics Committee has met once on November 9th, 2020 via Zoom. As was the case with our prior meeting on October 14th, the focus of our meeting was on reviewing a draft of changes to the village's code provisions related to ethics requirements and compliance. At our latest meeting, we reviewed a draft that was prepared by Todd Mann, who is our council's liaison, the village attorney, Ron Bolt, and myself, as authorized by the council on October 15th. This draft, which we reviewed, was intended to address comments to the committee and village residents, comments that the committee and village residents had on the prior draft. Just to step back for a second, the original task of our committee, dating back to October 27th, was to add to the existing code a process for handling complaints related to ethical requirements in the oath of office that is taken by every village employee, council member, and committee member. During our work on this project, however, often at the suggestion of village residents and always with the approval and participation of our council liaison, Todd Mann, and the village attorney, the committee has discussed changes to the code not directly related to the oath of office. For example, to enhance the existing code's due process requirements, to reduce and eliminate redundancies in the existing code, to eliminate irrelevant provisions in the existing code, and to make the existing code less punitive. Of course, ultimately, the editing of these existing provisions, if approved by the committee, will be our recommendations only. The council can decide to retain any of these provisions as it seems fit. But we have discussed provisions in the existing code that are not directly related to the oath of office issue. Our November 9th meeting was open to village residents with notice, together with an agenda and a link to the draft we were discussing, posted on the village website on or about Halloween or November 1st, with additional announcements by the village on November 6th and 9th. In addition to the committee, there were approximately 15 or 20 residents in attendance on Zoom, including at least 3 council members. And also in the notice of the meeting, we had invited the submission of comments on the draft we were discussing, and we received a number of comments from village residents, which were very helpful in preparing for and framing our discussion. We also received some comments on the need for and wisdom of changing the ethics portion of the code. We considered those comments to be more appropriate for the council to address, so at our meeting, we focused only on the draft itself. The detailed minutes of our November 9th meeting have been posted for several days on the village website. So unless the council wants, I will not go over the specific points we discussed. I do want to say that the committee's discussion and decisions were guided by the committee's own thoughts and suggestions and by those of residents, which we received both before the meeting and during the meeting, during the public comment segment of the meeting. Although the draft we discussed on November 9th addressed nearly all of the comments we had received prior to its preparation, as I said, new comments were received at and before the November 9th meeting. And a number of those comments, the committee decided at the meeting, were worthy of being addressed in a new draft, if a new draft was authorized by the council. These comments include, but are not limited to, provisions related to an affirmative duty of officials to timely update their conflict of interest questionnaires, a statute of limitations, a provision regarding the mootness of a complaint, and the resolution of complaints before a formal process begins. So we recommend, the committee recommends, that another draft be prepared by the village lawyer, Todd Mann, and myself, or another member of the ethics committee. And when that draft is completed, another open meeting of the ethics committee would be scheduled for the committee to review the new draft and for residents to make comments. As soon as the draft is completed, a copy of it will be included with the meeting notice and agenda, together with an invitation for residents to submit comments prior to the meeting by email to me or to the village manager. Because the comments to be addressed are fewer in number than was the case with prior drafts, I believe that a new draft can be completed and the next meeting scheduled the week of December 1st. Also, as I stated earlier, we refer to the council the comments we received on the need for a change to the code, or the wisdom of a change to the code. And to that end, I prepared and provided to Todd Mann a packet of all the comments we had received in that regard. So our recommendation is, as I stated, that another draft be prepared and when completed, be considered by the committee in an open meeting that would include the residents. Debbie or Laurie, do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything to add, Mark. I think you covered it.
Debbie was on the phone call.
She was.
Sorry, I was muted. Here I am. Sorry about that. I was trying to say something. Yeah, I have one or two things to add to that. First, I wanted to just say that Mark has put in a tremendous amount of time and energy, and I know Todd has as well, but I don't think you can all realize how much energy he has put into this. It's just been incredible. And from that is what I'm going to say, which is a number of times when these issues have come up about when people are saying they don't want to have an ordinance, et cetera, we have said, and we've deferred them, that that's something that ultimately the council will have to decide. And I feel like at this point we have put in so much time and energy, and then to have the council know now ultimately perhaps go back and say, wait a minute, we don't really want to address this through an ordinance. So what I would ask the council to look at, and maybe this is what Arthur was proposing, is it seems a little backwards, that we have now spent all this time and energy, and perhaps then the council might say this is not the right way to go after we're done with it. So I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not suggesting it to happen. I'm just saying that I hope that the process perhaps can be different going forward. Mark, you look bewildered.
No, I'm not bewildered. I'm just.
Oh, okay. The other thing I just want to say, which is a side point, I know a number of people, and Mark has said this a number of times, have been writing comments on the listserv. We are not all on the listserv. So we, in terms of people saying they want to have good communication, please don't, if you're interested in us hearing your comments, and we are very interested in hearing them, if you can please communicate them in a different way, we would really appreciate it. And that's what I have to say.
Okay, and Susan and other council members, we obviously are available to answer questions. I should have said that in my comments, but whatever questions you have, we're available to answer them as best we can.
Yeah, I have not a question, but some observations. When I look at this proposed ordinance as it's evolved so far, it does three things. It adds the oath of office violations to the list of things that, in addition to the financial conflict of interest. So this is where the partiality question comes in. It widens the scope to committees in addition to the council and employees. And importantly, it modifies procedures to enhance and clarify due process procedures. Now, as has been mentioned, the council has the authority to deal with committee members right now. We have no procedure. There are no concerns about due process. In fact, due process doesn't even have to enter into it. We could simply take a complaint and dismiss a committee member without any further ado. So one of the things that this current ordinance does, it introduces a whole sequence of procedures that follow due process and calls for evidence and enhances the fairness of the process. But also does something that the council has not had any experience of doing. It's just how do you handle these kinds of complaints? We have no procedures, no history on doing it. And at times in the past when these things have come up, both the ethics committee was at a loss because they did not have jurisdiction, and the council simply threw up its hands, didn't have a way to deal with it. So in that sense, I think that the committee, the ethics committee, and the huge amount of energy going into it are making up a hole that exists right now. How that hole is filled, I think, is where the debate is going. Whether it needs to be filled or can it be filled in a different way, I don't see a way that it can be filled in any other way. From the handbook, won't do it when you have a complaint. Just having a handbook on procedure that doesn't handle complaints. So I think that there is a hole here. There is a need. The need has gone unfilled, and we've been at a loss on how to deal with it. And the ethics committee is now dealing with that. So let me leave it at that.
So I would like to say on the due process point, the committee has worked hard on that area. I should also say of all of the many comments we've gotten on prior drafts, the suggestions on due process have been particularly helpful and have been largely adopted. And if there's another draft, there might be others adopted. But I would say that the committee has had its own ideas, but there's been a lot of community residents input on due process.
Mark and other members of the committee, I want to thank you and share the sentiments of my fellow council members and residents, the amount of time and effort you've put in. And I also want to acknowledge, I mean, we've had a lot of community time too. I think if we were to estimate, we've talked about this last time, it was about up to 300 hours, and it will be more. So I think the community's been engaged. And so I want to actually just reference Debbie's point, which is a wonderful one, which is, I think going forward, how are there ways, perhaps we can be more efficient? So maybe there is less time spent, or some of those key questions. And so I do have a question though, Mark and committee, and it may be a very simple, straightforward one. I know that there were residents who had submitted for the record some alternatives, or at least questioning other possibilities. And I know, Arthur, you expressed your opinion, but I'm just wondering, so for example, there was a discussion about the idea of, can we develop a complaint system that didn't require this additional ethics expanded jurisdiction, and also alternatives in terms of volunteer manuals. And I'm wondering, in those comments that were submitted to the ethics committee, was there some consideration around researching perhaps other alternatives, especially perhaps other sections in Chevy Chase, or was that, or do you consider that that was not your task? Your task was really to look at the ordinance. I just wanted to factor that in, because I appreciate where you've made a determination of, here is an update to the ordinance, but I just want to know, where in the calculus of looking at these alternative solutions, was that even on the table for you? And if not, I just want to know as a council member, so I understand in my decision making.
So
Thanks.
From the very first meeting that I think you were in attendance, the task was to for the committee to review a new draft of the ordinance, and our tasks since then have been to review drafts of the ordinance and help to prepare new drafts of the ordinance. So the answer to your question is, with respect to other ways of trying to accomplish the same thing, such as a personnel manual, or I think you suggested a referendum. So the answer is that is not something we have looked at. That's exactly what we have referred to the council for its decision. So the answer is that is not something we have considered.
Thanks. I really appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Susan, I have a question on this.
We would like to have the questions in the resident comment period, Larry.
I mean, about this report.
Yeah, the questions are supposed to be confined to 7:31 roughly, and 8:30. I mean, that's just how we typically do this.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Okay.
Otherwise, it gets very
Well, could you do
colloquial.
something at the end, maybe?
At the end, absolutely. Please, yes.
Thank
Okay. So I guess we can next do the election committee, and then we can further discuss.
Do we need a recommendation for the?
Well, I was going to say we can either recommend after the election committee report, or we can do the recommendation now so that the ethics committee people can log off if they have better things.
If it's possible to do the latter, I would appreciate it.
Okay, we will. Okay, so our recommendation from the ethics committee is to do a third draft, or they would do a third draft, and then hold another meeting after taking resident comments in order to determine the status of that. Does anyone want to make a motion to?
I'll make that motion.
The third draft.
And I'm happy to add some discussion after this in a second.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay.
So I thought I was gonna wedge in there for a sec. Before the vote.
Sorry.
I'm in favor of recommending that they do this next draft. I think that in the process of they're doing the drafts, the committee's done a very good job of incorporating a lot of process questions that have been raised relating to protections in all regards. And I think that's a very worthwhile exercise, regardless of whether we ultimately decide on a different vehicle if we do. But I think that the process that we're going through, I think, is a very worthwhile one to make sure that we have at least looked at every possibility going within the code for addressing this. So I think it's very worthwhile to go through this next iteration and at least have this as something as a kind of a springboard for final council discussion. So that's what
I would like to second that and to add that we all, council members, residents, think through these issues that I had raised. That this is what the committee is trying to do. Enlarge the scope of the committee to handle oath of office violations, to enlarge that to committee members, and to set up these procedures to provide due process. And if we at some point decide that we do not want to go in that direction, is there a different direction that we could go in to handle complaints? And I have not seen any that are satisfying other than the road we're going along. But these are the questions. These are the questions of what do we want to handle this? If a complaint arises, what do? Just say, now go away? And that's what we have tended to do in the past because we didn't have any way to deal with it. Or do we handle it in some kind of a organized way? We could simply turn a blind eye to complaints and ignore them. I don't think that's a good way to go, but it's the way we've gone in the past, simply because we haven't had any complaints until recently. Well, we had one in the past and some recent ones. So if we get a complaint every 10 years or so, maybe that's the way to do it. We don't need a mechanism. I'm not sure that that's the appropriate way to go.
All right.
Arthur, this is Jeff, and I really appreciate that. And you know how much respect I have for you and also the other council members. And just with the clarification that Mark kindly provided, I just put out there that while I appreciate what's been said, the thing that I would have liked to see is, I know that we're saying let's continue on a new draft of the ordinance, but I do feel that there are these other alternatives that we're not putting as much emphasis or energy in terms of researching or exploring. So I think at the end of the day, while we would send it back, or at least some members of the council would send it back for a redraft, what I would like to see would be that we are putting as much effort into looking at these other alternatives, because quite frankly, I just don't have enough information about what those other alternatives could be So we could balance those out between an ordinance versus a complaint system, and that would be the ideal. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I would just love to have a process where we were putting as much emphasis in exploring other options, and it doesn't seem that the committee is focused on that. And if not, are there others like residents or elsewhere that could put emphasis in that? So at the end of the day, we have like a laundry list of options that we could look at. That would be phenomenal and fantastic. Over.
Can I respond to that for a second? That's never, Jeff, we have not responded to that because that's never been, we've never been asked. So obviously, if that's something the council asks us to do, we respond as best we can to that. But it is not because we ignore things. We have decided that that is an issue for the council to pick up as to how they want to enforce their ethics obligations.
And that's why I just want a quick comment, Mark. Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to make it clear, it is not because we have just sloughed it off. We have done what we've been asked to do.
Yeah, and I want to be very clear again, and very cordial, very professional. I cannot say enough about what you, the committee, Todd, others, in terms of putting in and focusing on that alternative and option that you have explored. And all I'm saying, in the idealized world, and also with what the residents are seem to be clamoring for, if we put as much energy into exploring perhaps other options, then as Arthur, I think, was indicating, at the end of the day, we'd have a set of choices, and we could really make an informed decision based upon what are those options before us. And that's the only clarification, is I think right now, we don't really have an exploration of those other options. We only have, in a month from now, an updated ordinance. And that's just how the process is right now. So, over.
If I might just ask you a quick question, what types of other options are you contemplating, Jeff?
You know, Susan, I really appreciate that question. And
thank you.
Actually, I'm putting it on the table as I actually don't know. And that's why I would love to have some more energies in terms of what those things are. So, for example, going out to other sections in Chevy Chase, understanding how do they handle complaints. Or I know that some residents have talked about, who have had many years of experience around volunteerism, you know, let's have a manual. And again, I'm not a legal authority, I'm not a legal expert, and I'm not trying to say I have the answers, but it just seems that there may be some things we could add into the mix that would give us a host of options to explore. And then as a community and as a council, we would be much better informed in terms of what those options are. We looked at all of them, and we took the one that, quite frankly, none of them are going to be perfect, but we took the one that most fits our community and addresses those concerns. And that's all I just want to say.
Okay.
So I'd love to hear from Ron, if we could. Ron, you know, I mean, there's certain, you know, we've been focused on the ordinance, and are there other things, are there other vehicles out there that could help accomplish this that we're not focused on?
Well, yeah, I haven't prepared to answer that question this evening, so I can't give you a full answer. But you know, off the top of my head, I would say the really only other idea that comes to mind is one that's already been floated by the residents, and that is, instead of adding the process to the code, add the complaint and resolution process to a policy. But you know, one potential pitfall with that approach is the ethics committee is a statutory body. It's created by the village code, and its powers are listed in the village code. And those powers currently do not include review of complaints related to impartiality or partiality. So if there was a complaint and we attempted by policy to have that reviewed by the ethics committee, a person who's part of that complaint process would be able to argue the ethics committee doesn't have jurisdiction. So really, if you want to empower the ethics committee, the code should be amended to expand their current powers.
Ron, several months ago, probably everyone has forgotten about it now, we noted that that the village has no handbook or operating procedures for how committees should operate. And at that time, you sent us as a model the Town of Chevy Chase committee operating procedures and outline of roles and responsibilities. And that essentially just says how you meet, how you take minutes, how people get appointed and select chairs and so on. It says nothing in there about how complaints are dealt with or against committee members or against council members. So I think it's still a worthwhile project that we come up with a handbook for how committees operate, but it's not going to answer this question at all. As far as I can see, the one model that we have, how to handle complaints.
Well, yeah, and it might be worthwhile to add, if part of this goal is to set up an independent body so that you have another set of eyes on things, so that, for example, if a complaint involves the village council, you might not want the village council resolving a complaint against it with respect to conduct of anyone in the village. And so empowering the ethics committee provides that secondary benefit. Ultimately, the council can decide what's appropriate for the village. And, I can report to you on what some of the other municipalities do, but, I can tell you, I haven't researched everybody else, but I do represent 9 other communities, and I can tell you, as one of my favorite law professors used to say, the law is scar tissue. So the laws that we have in existence today are usually reactive. They are adopted in response to experiences. And at the municipal level on the whole, most of the experiences to date have been related to financial conflicts of interest. And so the laws of the state and of the other municipalities focus on financial conflicts. And so there are procedures in place in these other jurisdictions related to financial, but impartiality is rare. Complaints based on impartiality, or lack of impartiality, I should say, are more rare. But if the Village of Martin's Visions feels that based on prior experiences it's worth addressing, then it would be addressed as something that has come to light recently that maybe other jurisdictions haven't experienced. And it might be worthwhile to note that the state ethics law requires municipalities to have a conflicts of interest code, which again addresses mostly financial, but also the improper use of the prestige of office for the private gain of others, but exempts jurisdictions of a certain size. And the State Ethics Commission has found that if your operating a budget is over a certain limit, and I forget what that limit is, it might be around 1.3 million, and your population is of a certain size, then you're going to be subject to that act and have to have your council members on an annual basis, and anyone else who handles your books and records submit a detailed financial disclosure statement which lists all your investments and so on and so forth, which is burdensome to some. But then if you're under the thresholds for your operating budget and size, the state will exempt your jurisdiction, and the village is under those limits. So the village is exempt from the state laws. But in granting the exemption, the State Ethics Committee has said, we've taken a look at your village code, and would encourage you, even if you're not required by law, to have an ethics ordinance to enforce what ethics ordinance you feel is appropriate for your jurisdiction.
I'd like to suggest that I think that some of the things that the ethics committee is looking at, some of the processes, whether they're in an ordinance, they might be applicable or relevant to whatever process we take. So nothing would change my recommendation that they come up with another draft. But I would like to suggest that Ron, if you could do some of that research and see what is going on, that maybe we will have another vehicle to look at if we decide that way. And we'll have some of the things that we can draw from the work that the ethics committee has done.
I would definitely move that we direct Ron to do that research, sort of finite. And we did vote for the third draft, but I neglected to put on the record how everyone voted, since it wasn't unanimous. So everyone who voted in favor of the third draft. Katya, or I'm not seeing you.
I just said aye.
Okay, so so 4 ayes and Jeff voted against. Okay. And so now we would entertain a motion to have Ron do that research to determine whether there are workable options.
I don't think we need a motion.
We can just direct him. Okay.
Give them direction.
Sure, that's great. I mean, I hate to direct people. It's not my natural personality, sorry. I was just gonna have complicity. Okay, so I think we have pretty much concluded the ethics report.
Can I just answer one comment that came in?
Please do.
I'm sorry, then I'll be gone.
No.
Somebody asked, well, how do we reach the ethics committee? So we have given out one. You can reach us in one of two ways. You can send an email to the village manager, or you can send an email to me. The village manager will send me your email. I will distribute it to the entire committee. If you send it to me directly, I will distribute it to the entire committee, as I've done in the past. My email address will be in the announcement of the next meeting, like it was in the announcement of the last meeting. So feel free to contact us that way. I have not been for years on listserv. I don't read listserv. So if you intend to get comments to me via listserv, I won't see them. So please send them either to the village manager or to me.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, I think that concludes our Ethics Committee report. And thank you all for all the really incredible work you've done on this.
And Susan, I'm sorry, I'll make this quick. I just want to recognize, so I think it's wonderful and I really appreciate the idea that Ron is going to be doing a little extra research about what alternatives might be in addition to this redraft. So there could be that. I do want to recognize, I'm not sure how it'll work, but it's something we can take outside of this. Is there's been a lot of these great suggestions by members of the community, and I think it would be nice to figure out how at least some of those suggestions are incorporated in this thought process. And I'm not quite sure how to do that, but perhaps I can take it offline with Ron or work with Todd on that. And the disadvantage, I think, that the community or residents have, that the council and Ron and perhaps even the ethics committee might have, are what specific scenarios the complaints fell in. And so the idea of, is there a way to create some generic set of complaints that folks can understand what needs to be addressed? Because I think for residents, that's still not quite clear. And if we can come to a way of that residents can fully understand what are these scenarios that are or cannot be addressed, then I think will get us closer to all of us understanding Oh, I understand. That's why we need to go this route, because there really is no alternative. I think there's just some disconnect in terms of knowledge, and it's just something I wanted to take offline to see if we can figure that out. Because we just want to diffuse, I think, the air pressure so everyone is on the same page in terms of what the issues are specifically in terms of scenarios, and then what are the possible solutions to address those scenarios. And if we all can come together on that, then I believe we'll come forward with some recommendation and adoption of something. Then at least not everyone can agree, but at least everyone understands that process thoroughly with full transparency. I'm just going to leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so now I think we're ready for the election committee report. Tiffany Cisna.
All right, Tiffany Cisna for the election committee. We have reported at the last few council meetings, and we had 2 open meetings ourselves in August and September. At the October meeting, we noted for the council, recommended that the council would have, if this county and state have not lifted their limitations on mass gatherings, that the backup plan would be a 100% mail-in option. We've been working on updating, but we came to that conclusion in our September open meeting. We reported it to the council in October. We have been working on updating using the documents the prior committees have made in the past as our baseline documents, working documents, to update recommendations for the council going forward. Many of those things were administrative in nature. There were a few questions that fell kind of into the policy bucket, which we, as you will all see, there's a cover note that explains how we arrived at where we are today. It's just 3 paragraphs, so hopefully it's easy for folks to follow. There were a few provisions that raised some questions from committee members that we are punting to the council because they're policy things that we would need their direction on, or they may tell us it's outside of our lane and let them move forward. So there will be a cover note and then a policy as well as a plan, which includes dates and times for next year. I believe the council is all in receipt of it now, and the goal would be to take a look at it. It will be on the website for the next month, and then it'll be something you guys will discuss in December. That's it.
Right, you all have done a tremendous amount of work on this, and thank you for creating what you have termed the evergreen document, which is very appropriate with the holidays approaching. I think we'll get the draft up soon. We haven't had a chance to look at it, as you noted. It's just recently been circulated because you've been working on it until very recently. But it will be circulated to residents with explanations and some of that plain English, non-legalese background. So thank you.
Well, and since I'm not a lawyer, hopefully that fits in for everybody else.
That helps, yes. It always helps not to be a lawyer, in my experience. Ron's too, I suspect, and probably many other people on the call.
Tiffany, I have one quick question.
Sure.
You said deferring to the council on what is a qualified voter. What's the issue there?
I'm gonna defer to legal counsel on that question, Arthur.
Oh.
Go ahead, Ron.
Okay, so the village charter currently provides that qualified voter includes someone who resides or owns property in the village. And so the question exists as to whether a property owner who does not reside in the village should be allowed to vote. And there is case law on that issue that I've brought to the attention of the village.
Okay, yeah, when I was rereading that today,
What the hell it is?
that's what came to mind. There are other issues there. Suppose several people own a property
Somebody
jointly.
needs to be muted.
Do they all get to vote? Suppose a corporation owns a property. So I could see that this would raise a lot of different kinds of questions.
Yeah, and I think it is actually a question we've addressed as a council before. And I think it was, well, we can discuss it in future, at a future open meeting, but I think that there were very strong feelings about that one, perhaps, maybe not. But it seems that it is kind of moot for the village. But we will discuss it in much greater detail in future open meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Arthur. Thanks, Tiffany. Okay.
And Josh and George.
And absolutely, Josh and George. You guys did a lot of work on that. All three of you, so thank you. I was just thanking you for the report. Is Monty Boland on? I don't think so. No, so we'll have the tree supervisor report next month. I think next is the report out from and discussion of the October 1st Community Listening Forum and key themes, which were carried over from last month since we ran out of time. So that will be Jeff Blander.
Thank you, Susan and everyone. And I'm sure by now, looking at the hour or the hour approaching, my voice is probably wearing people out. I know it's loud, but I think there's a couple things that would be great to cover. First of all, I just want to recognize the appreciation of fellow council members and residents. I mean, you know, at the time that was conceived, again, this was before a lot of the issues that we're talking about now around communication. I mean, there was an acknowledgement early on that we needed a forum, and this was one step in that direction of bringing us closer to residents. So kudos not only to all the council members and the village manager, but the residents. There was a really strong turnout. And let me give just a couple high-level bullets, and I know everyone was there, so please comment if I missed anything. But, you know, in general, again, we're recirculating important things. I think there was a discussion on, at that time, the sign ordinance and can we develop a process, you know, a decision tree. And I think we've talked about this several times, and I think we should just make that happen, you know, whenever we start that. But some process where it's just, boom, here's the SOP, we know problem, how does it get from discussion to you decide on ordinance or you decide on other things. I think we can really put something together in relatively short order, and it would take a lot of the air pressure out of the tires going forward on any new ordinances. I think the other piece that came up, and I'm going a little out of order, but a lot of time was spent, were a lot of issues around safety. And so I want to really recognize the residents and others who brought up issues around 5G. There were things that were even brought up around noise and sound pollution around leaf blowers. There were other things around pesticides. I don't think it was brought up, but again, it was mentioned today around traffic and how it affects children. And then, of course, something which is very near to all of us is Shepherd Park. And what we're seeing is a confluence of crowds, and not everyone seems to be kind of cognizant of the social distancing and other things, and recognizing we have a lot of limitations of what can and can't do. So I put out there that I think that there is some sort of discussion or decision of how we might handle a bunch of these safety concerns. Is it a committee, a task force, or even a discussion group? I wouldn't say necessarily a vote today, but I do think it's something important. And then one other piece which I wanted to put out there, and I'll also fellow council members, again, I'm a bit biased, but I thought it was a really healthy type of venue. Now, it's not something I think you do every week or every month, but perhaps we look at a quarterly or something. But I think we, in addition to what Arthur suggested around listservs and other forms of improving communication, I think the forum proves to be something that folks really like to engage in, and we can find a cadence around that. I think that could be effective and continue that sort of dialogue. So that's, I think, the gist of what I wanted to share. And I welcome other council members and, if appropriate, other members and residents who are on the line to comment. So thank you, Susan, for letting me.
Yeah, I have one question for Ron. One of the questions that came up during the session was potential village liability to radiation harms, health or property from 5G transmissions. And we know that all the utilities passing through the village have the potential for creating enormous harms. Think of a gas line explosion as happened in San Bernardino, California, where several hundred houses blew up and burned to the ground. But Ron, this is not a new problem of damage from utilities. Who is responsible? Does the village bear financial responsibility for that, for those sorts of things, or who does?
Yeah, generally the village is not responsible. The utility provider causing the injury would be responsible for the injury it causes. But that said, it's a difficult question to answer because utility companies may argue with respect to radiation from 5G that as long as they are operating within the standards approved by the federal government, that there can be no liability. So it's a difficult question to answer, and of course depends heavily on the facts. An issue that's being litigated as well, including by Montgomery County.
But in general, the utilities are the ones who are liable for harm. If a gas line blew up.
Yes.
Or a high power line fell down on a car, on a house, or a person.
That's correct.
Okay. So in general, the village is not the last in the line of people that can be sued.
That's correct.
And even better, not first in the line.
Or first. Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course, a plaintiff may sue everybody. I'm not going to say that the village wouldn't be named in a lawsuit.
Right.
Well, I apologize for jumping back in, but I just want to put it out there again for discussion. It's not about punting decisions, but there's one thing about litigation, but there's another thing about the real harm of exposure, which again, if we liken it back to the 30s and 40s, there were advertisements where you literally would have Marlboro saying, 402 doctors said that Marlboro is the safest brand. And I just bring that up that perhaps as a real concrete idea is we seem to have some residents in our community. Not only are they really in tune with this, but are really passionate about perhaps exploring some ideas. And I don't have all the answers, but maybe there's a way of tapping into that again as some sort of I know committees take time and energy and money, but some sort of discussion group where at least we can continue to recognize their opinions. And because like you're saying, Ron, there's a lot of litigation. We're going to have, now that we're having a transition, who knows where this is going to go, but it's always good maybe to be a little bit proactive around what options might be. That's all. Just, how do we tap into that experience and energy? I don't know, but maybe there's a way to do it. So, over. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So next on our agenda was the discussion of the 2020 annual survey results. And unfortunately, given the lateness of the hour, I think we will carry that over until the December meeting. If Doug is still on the line. We could now do the building administrator's report. Doug?
Good evening.
Hey, Doug. Hi.
Just a few things to go over. At the 6609 Brookville Road, the applicants have submitted an application to remove the existing porch and add an addition to the rear of the house. The plans have been reviewed by the village and we're waiting for county approval. At 7200 Chestnut, the applicants have submitted an application to construct an addition on the west side of the existing house. County permit was issued on September 3rd. And the village issued a permit October 9th. At 3513 Raymond Street, the applicants have submitted a plan to remove the existing house and construct a new house. Information meeting was held on Tuesday, November 17th, and we're waiting for a county permit to be issued. At 3517 Shepherd, the applicant has submitted a application to add an addition to the front right corner of the house. The county issued their permit on November 10th. And the village is right now reviewing the application. And finally, the last item on my list is miscellaneous items for the state highway. They did respond finally to our request for information. They provided it to us yesterday, and Niles and I are going over their comments now. But basically, they're saying they're still studying it, and they'll get back to us in a few days with more information. So we'll be waiting for that information, and if I don't hear it soon, I'll send them another email. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Doug, and thank you for your patience.
Okay, any questions?
I don't have any. Does anyone else? Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you. So next is Arthur's financial report.
Okay, again, this can be very short. We're spending money less rapidly than we have budgeted. Not quite sure why, but that's the case. But more importantly, we've hardly gotten any money coming in from our revenues. And that's quite expected because we're not going to get a major tranche from the state from our income tax until the end of November. I'm expecting it not to have any negative surprises because it's still coming in from taxes, from income from last year before the recession hit. And so we should be in pretty good shape going forward, at least for the next 6 months or so. But November 30th, I'll have either good or bad news for us on what we're getting from the state income tax, which is our major source of income. And that's all.
And what's the date for the good or bad news?
It's the end of the month, so it'll be
November
the 29th
30th.
through the 30th
Okay.
of the month.
I'm marking my calendar.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Niles, manager's report.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay.
So a couple of things. First off, the village auditors have completed their work. They have shared their results with the village. They've been clean audit. Nothing really to say there. We've submitted it to the state via state guidelines on October 31st, and we've done it where they've presented in the past, probably at the December meeting, just to get it still this year. Sidewalk repair has been completed. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and for your cooperation. This went very smoothly from my perspective, and I think that it's a real positive to kind of get that through and done with. The leaf vacuuming also, the second round is being completed this week. A couple of residents have asked about a few other areas where there are leaves that, as part of tomorrow, Rolling Acres is going to go through and make sure to pick up some of the piles that have formed. I know, there's some.
Niall?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, this is Katya in front of my house, and I'm sorry I'm using this to give you this information, but they've only picked up half of our leaves, and so half of the pile is still there.
Certainly.
I will make that clear to them tomorrow and do that as well. Okay.
I don't know if the truck filled up or what, but it was really weird.
Yeah. I assume there's probably something like that, but I'll be in touch with them. The leaf bags, we have them now. There was a delay from the supplier in getting them to us. We have them now. We're organizing them to distribute to the village residents. We're going to try to do it as efficiently as possible and try to get it done in one day. So I'll have more information on that when we have the date. But we do have them, and so we're trying to organize that to be as efficient as possible. The village directory, we are, hats off to Martha, who's been working really hard on getting it as accurate as possible, so that we can send it to all of you. There's Martha, thank you. For just a quick last check to make sure that everybody's stuff is connected. So we'll be sending out emails via street. This is something that's been done in the past, and so we'll try to do that again. The GIS stuff we're basically done. We're just doing the last couple of tweaks to make sure that everything's good. And we can kind of update the map and put that on the website and so on. And then lastly, there's some RFPs that have to be done before the end of the year. So those will be posted next week, and so that they can be completed by the end of the year, so that we are on pace with that. And then one other thing that I want to mention. The surrounding municipalities have done a letter regarding the Montgomery Thrive 2050 plan. There's some specific things. There's a whole range of lists regarding this plan. The village did not sign on to this letter only because there was not an opportunity to have a public meeting when the letter was drafted. The letter was for the meeting that is happening right now with the Montgomery County Planning Board. The date to receive testimony is December 10th. I sent the letter to the chair to send to the council so that we could potentially draft a letter in support of their letter. Some of the key things about this involve zoning and zoning changes potentially. But there's also concerns that going forward with this plan. Yeah. Susan, could you mute? Sorry, it's just making the echo.
What do I need to do?
Oh, I can mute you. I'll just do it.
Oh.
If let me do that. I don't know why it's not. But anyways, okay, there we go. But yes, so the involves zoning changes potentially, but also issues about the going forward with this plan, given the pandemic, and some of the issues related to using data before the pandemic versus after. So that was a concern of neighboring communities. So we can circulate that as well. And I just wanted to say that that is something that the village can sign on to or not, but just putting that out there for the village. Okay?
Okay, that's it. Thanks, Niles. One last, I'm muted still. Yeah. Okay, I'm on.
I'll unmute you. Hang on. Or you should. Let's see if it will. There we go.
Okay, one quick order of business. If we could just approve the minutes that were circulated and approved through the administrative powers of the council. If we could just do that on the record, I would be grateful.
You muted again, so if you could do that, I'll mute me.
Now I'm muted.
Susan, you're muted.
I know. Hang on. I think I'm okay.
Now you're good.
Unmuted. I like it. Okay, so I said just as one minor order of business before we get to the resident comments, we've all approved the minutes that were circulated via email, as is our right administratively. But I wondered if we could just approve them on the record, just so that it's okay. All in favor of approving the minutes? Okay.
Well, Susan, I'm sorry, I don't want to be a pest. That's the last thing I want to do. But I know that there were some residents who I think had commented that they had some edits or things to amend. So I just wanted to make sure we're not ignoring that, or however you wanted to handle that.
Okay, well, residents certainly are able to append things. They are able to include documents in the record, but residents don't edit our minutes. They are the council minutes. They are not resident minutes. So
Are the documents included? I don't recall that they
I think those are the documents that were discussed earlier.
Right.
So, hang on, let me unmute for 1 second.
So I just, I just want to, again, very quickly, it's late, but if there's any residents that felt that whatever they had submitted for whatever reason wasn't included, I just want them to have an opportunity perhaps to submit it for this next round. That's
Sure,
all.
that's great.
Not to necessarily amend the minutes, but the idea
Right.
if they submitted and got lost in the shuffle, they can resubmit it, and hopefully that will really make everyone feel comfortable.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. So now if we have other resident comments?
Yeah, there was I think Marty's had a suggestion about a volunteer manual, and it was a 3-paragraph written thing. Susan, did you get a chance to read that?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that? I was distracted by the chat. Sorry. I was listening, but there are all these chats flying around. Okay. Sorry. Please repeat.
Marty had prepared a document about a volunteer manual.
Right.
And I was wondering if you'd had a chance to look at that, what she wrote.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so she's suggesting something that it looks like the length of time is not just a few months of, and that's because some of the people that are working on that have got some pretty good HR experience. But I'm just kind of, there's been repeatedly tonight comments about this thing, and since Arthur said, hey, we get a complaint once every 10 years, so why wouldn't the council do something to get that volunteer group that wants to provide this information to put that on the table and take a look at it?
Yeah, in fact, I haven't seen anything like the 1 or 2 handbooks that I've seen have nothing in there about complaints. So Marty, if you have any examples of how these handle complaints, I'd like to see them. If you could send them along as a model.
I'll be happy to do that. And like I said, Naomi Nairman and Paula Goldberg have both volunteered to do a draft of a manual that includes complaint procedures. And it's readily available out there. So yes, we will do that. The summary that Larry's talking about is just a quick sort of timeline and what it would include, and I'll make sure that all the council members get that. I'll send it to you.
Well, if there are some actual examples out there.
Yes, we'll pull them together for you. Okay. And again, Naomi has the lead on this.
Okay, thank you.
So, and then the final thing is, I just wanted to, Niles, my hat is off to you, guy. You have more courage than anybody I know. I have never seen another guy mute a woman as you did a minute ago and get away with it. So, congratulations, buddy.
I'm just sorry that my husband isn't on this call.
Okay.
I don't know where he is when he's really needed.
Susan, are we still on resident? Oh, Holly, go ahead.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Sure.
I just want to thank you all for working through this. And I think Debbie Romel's comment earlier, I hope I said her name right, about this process being a little backwards was really spot on. I think looking at all these options and asking Ron Bolt to investigate what the other jurisdictions have, which he probably knows, and informing us about that so we could take an easier road that wouldn't stir up the residents so much maybe. But I think having resident input earlier in the process is good. I think having a forum to discuss this stuff is really helpful. And I think there's more than one way to skin this cat. And, I'm not saying I know all the answers. I sure don't. But I do think it was informative to hear Ron say that, if I heard him right, maybe I didn't, that the other communities that he's helping or that he's not familiar and I don't want to put words in his mouth, so correct me, Ron, if I'm wrong, don't have an ordinance that relates to ethics or impartiality. And if I'm misrepresenting what you said, please tell me. But I think where the community is taking umbrage, many members of the community, I can't speak for everyone, of course, is that we started with an ordinance in place that had consequences, and it just seemed like overkill when we could have made a manual or something that was less onerous. Ron, did I misquote you? Please tell me if I did, because I don't mean to. Thank you.
No, I don't think you misstated anything. Although I didn't say other jurisdictions don't have an ethics ordinance. Most jurisdictions do have an ethics ordinance, but it's focused on financial conflicts of interest.
I see.
And as you stated earlier, Ron, that may simply be a function of them not having encountered issues that were sufficiently troubling and concerning as we have in the very recent past. Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, please.
Marty?
I referred earlier to the November 12th letter from a number of residents, quite a group.
Right.
And my question is procedural. How do residents get those questions answered? For example, the first one on the list is whatever happened to the sign that the residents requested and that I understand the council did agree to put up a sign in front of the office that says something like VMA opposes all forms of racism. How does that get on the agenda to get done? I understood the council agreed to do it, but it hasn't been
I'm
done.
not so sure that the council did agree to do it. We can take that up next time.
Okay. The second item on the list
actually, we can take up all of these next time. It's 9:23, and you just asked how it can happen. It can happen next time.
Okay. Will it happen next time?
Certainly.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, because it was a short list, but it was important to people.
It was 15 items, I think.
One thing that I didn't bring up about this trying to take an easier path on this. I have a security clearance. My daughter, her husband, and my son all have security clearances. And an action like that I saw in the descriptions of this proposed ordinance could literally deny any of the 3 or 4 of us, if that stuff came about, to lose that clearance. And to see the interest in going in that direction is another thing I think is just kind of absurd.
Okay, well, thank you, Larry. I think we've heard these comments. I think that certainly as someone who would be subject to the requirements, I would have absolutely no hesitation in being subject to this ethics ordinance. I mean, it's, to me, not a constraint because I will act ethically. Anyone who is concerned about spurious comments should be reassured by the fact that there is a very careful process, as was discussed earlier. I think it's actually more chilling when people suggest that perhaps there's some evil intent in trying to present an ethics ordinance. I personally think, based upon my experience in the last year, having served on the council for just over 5 years, that we do need it. So that's my resident
You do,
comment.
but I don't know that you need it for volunteers.
We're all volunteers.
Okay, on the committees, and I don't think you have any idea what the value and cost is for a security clearance, and how fragile it is to lose it.
Okay, well, we'll look into the likely impacts on security clearances. But at this,
Janine Trudeau has her hand up.
oh, Janine, I'm sorry. Janine?
She's unmute. Janine, unmute.
There I got it. Okay. Hi, Janine Trudeau from Bradley Lane. Who is Larry, who's been talking?
Larry Wasson.
Larry Wasson. W-A-S-S-O-N.
Oh, fine. I just saw Larry and somebody, I can't see his picture. Thank you. I just, thank you for everybody. That was my main question. And, I guess I'll,
It's late.
yes, I think that's it, and, anyway, I won't say, I'll send my notice into people, it's just late and we've done a lot. Thank you, I don't wanna take, everybody said they'll do a brief and they take longer. Thank you, good night.
Thank you, Janine. It's true. I was supposed to be timekeeping and I let it slide a bit. Thanks. Okay, so if we have no further comments, I think we could have it. Yeah? Do you want to make a motion?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Who seconded?
I don't know. Anyone second? I'll second if nobody else is.
I'll second on third and fourth.
Okay. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, meeting's adjourned.
Good night.
Good
Night,
night.
thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Niles.
Yep, thank you. Sorry. Oh, she went off. Okay, I'm going to end the meeting for all, just so that everybody knows.
Yeah. Oh, I should have said 9:29.
Yep, 9:29 is fine.
Okay, sorry.
No, yeah, that's fine. That's one of those things to
Oh,
include.
oh, I'm sorry.
Hang on.
Yeah.